Yeah, I just wanted to say, that I've been falsely accused. You know, ultimately, because somebody that was totally submissive to the opposite sex. Let me show you. Like, nobody's gonna come in here if they're like totally, totally, totally feminist and do this. And what I said about the whole thing. Uh, you have to keep in mind that this is the thread that started it off. Bodhi Foza, who's almost chronically, like almost always making feminist posts, writes monogamy for women has been shaped by patriarchy and the idea that it being chosen is where women value lies. Women are told to wait, to be desirable but not too much, to compete with other women, and to feel like you've won once a man commits to you. However, a lot of men are socialized to see monogamy as something they grant to a woman while still feeling entitled to access other women. They want a quote main woman who is loyal, emotionally available, and sexually exclusive, and holding things down. Where they keep one foot out the door, they'll call it temptation biology or just quote how men are unquote. But the expectation is for you to be disciplined and to forgive him. When the capitalist logic creeps in again is that exclusivity increases your quote value unquote as a woman, but access increases his quote status unquote as a man. You're told to preserve yourself, but he is praised for how many women he can attract. Being chosen doesn't mean you're respected or even loved. That doesn't mean you're valued. It just means that he decided to have you under patriarchy. That decision matters more than whether you're actually being treated well by him. And Jessica Lynn comes into the thread and she responds, men honestly believe that they are multiple partners when married. They'll say all male species are like that. Okay, well, Chad, a praying mantis bites the head off its mate when done mating, but you don't see women going around doing that now, do you? Which is a funny concept, but of course I see this. But initially, of course, I don't read it through, but I just when I come in, I'm a bit annoyed, not like really really perturbed by it, but just sort of like playfully annoyed, sort of. But so I'm like, oh yes, an insect behavior can be generalized to humans, and then obviously I'm indicating that this is sarcasm. Ours is much closer to bonobos left to our own devices, but let's go much further down the food chain too. I'm a little bit, annoyed, because I see this so frequently where people use other animal species to try to make, claims about human nature. And of course, it irritates me, especially in particular because, especially in the context of like monogamy, it comes up all the time. People like have this weird favoritism towards prairie voles, but, the truth is right there. We much more close to bonobos. And, but despite my, irritated way of coming into the thread, a bunch of people start agreeing with me, in the thread in response to it. Even, I get, humans are not monogamous. Most people have had way more than one single partner. We're not wolves or parrots, and we simply do not mate for life. Humans as a species, humans are a species of great ape, and I'm just like, no disagreement here. Like I was dating somebody that was polyamorous for a very, very, very long time, so I'm open minded about all this stuff. I don't. But anyways, so I come in and I mean I'm a little bit perturbed despite laughing about it, because I'm just trying to say, like we can't, everything we know about biology is that species behave radically differently in like every way, especially when we start getting into like how the species mate and have sex, and the sexuology of these species, can be really different and wildly so, and everything. And my point in all this is just, if I were completely submissive to the opposite sex, I couldn't find myself trying to reply to all that shit saying, nah, bonobos. Just I wouldn't have done it, because I wouldn't have had the spine, to be irritated enough to respond that way.